I was just going to say that if you want to leave the session at any time without giving a reason, that's fine as well. Some of the subjects that we have talked about are upsetting and stressful, but please, that's fine. And we will be leading this web cafe in English. Many of us speak different languages, but that's what we aim to do. So first of all, I'm really, really pleased to have our guest speaker here today. Her name is Fatou Cisse, and she's a passionate and dedicated gender activist who is known for her work in the Bama community to end FGM, domestic violence, and other harmful practices. She has worked extensively with vulnerable Bama women, including refugee, asylum seekers, and migrant during her previous role as an Oxfordshire domestic abuse servicer. So we're really pleased to have her here today. She's done many programs and TV documentaries about the subject we're going to be talking about. So thank you, Fatou.
Thank you very much, Sobi. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, it sounds like a basic question, but I think it's an important question. Please explain what polygamy is.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's good to be back here in OAC. Just before I go into that question, I'd like to say that I'm speaking not as an expert in this field, but as somebody who has experienced direct impact. I've been affected by polygamy myself, and I work with so many women who are experiencing polygamy. And also I come from Gambia, where 70 to 80% of the marriages are polygamous. So I am speaking from that perspective, just to make that disclaimer. So polygamy, it's a broad term, and it means marriages of more than one spouse. So many spouses. So a man could marry more than one wife, or a woman could have more than one husband. Or you have something called the group marriages, which is quite new. So where a man marries more than one wife is called polygamy. And then you have where a woman marries more than one husband is called polyandry. So these are all new. Polyandry is not that common, but I think for the purpose of today's conversation, we would be talking about polygyny or polygyny. I think that's how it is pronounced. When we say polygamy, that's what we are talking about today, where a man marries more than one wife. So we know that polygamy is very common, predominantly in Muslim communities, but it's not just exclusive to that faith group. So Christians do it, Hindus, different faith groups do it, different communities do it. We know that there is many contributing factors or motivating factors why polygamy happens. So for example, in the Gambia, polygamy happens because it's a sign of prestige. So it earns men that respect, it earns them that social status. So when you have more than one wife, you are respected. And when you have one wife, you are monogamous marriages. Normally men who are in that type of relationship are termed as failed men. They're not brave enough, So you have families where the wife, for example, the first wife only have female children, so only girls, for example, and there is a need to have that male child, and as a result, the husband may decide and marry a second or third or fourth wife because they want somebody to carry their name. Another explanation to why polygamy happens is to carry on the family lineage. So there are families where you will find that the great-grandfather, for example, had 4 wives, and then the grandfather would also need to have 4 wives, or 2 or 3 wives, it depends. And then comes the father, then the son. So it carries on. It's like, a rite of passage. You have to go through it, especially when you are the firstborn male child of the family. And then you have families where these days the excuse that they give is that there are more women than men in society, and so there is a need for men to marry more than one wife. We know that that's not true. Even if it is, there wouldn't be any one single point in time where all men would need to be married at the same time, all women. It's practically impossible, but that's one of the reasons. And in terms of the women, the reason why some women accept polygamy is because of the lack of financial independence. So some women are not employed, they don't have a job, or they might not be educated, they might be dependent on their husband, and so they just accept it. And poverty is also another thing. We know that there are families where the breadwinner is normally the dad, and when you have a lot of girls, for example, in one home, teenagers, young children, they just send them off to be second wives because the father cannot, for example, provide for all the family members. And that is why we say polygamy encourages forced marriages or early marriages, because of that reason. So we know that I said in the Gambia, 70 to 80%. I'm just looking at my notes because there are things there that I really want to point out. 70 to 80% of Gambian marriages are polygamous. And very young people are doing it now. In those previously, when I was young, it was the older people like 50s, that get second wife. But these days, 30s, 25s, you have two young women. My Where I come from, my person, my home, my dad married a second wife when I was very, very small. It didn't last long, it ended. I didn't have an opinion that time, but it happened again. And in a moment, I think when we talk about the impact in more detail, the abuse, I'll share a little bit about that experience. In terms of statistics, they said over 3 million people around the world believe in polygamy, and more than 2 million women and children live under the oppression of polygamy. And when I talk about polygamy, I like to ask this question, who is the main beneficiary to this practice? Who is actually benefiting in polygamy? Because the way it is sold now, the way it is presented is as if this is the new norm. People, even in the Western world, people are now accepting it. And when you look at those who advocate for it, they're often men or women who are actually supporting or enabling the patriarchal mindset. So when I ask this question, who is benefiting from polygamy? Because I have friends who say they would accept it, and when we go deeper into the conversation and say, well, what is in there for you? And when you dig deeper, there is basically not much there, if any. There is often so much for the man. The husband is the main benefactor because he's got the opportunity to have two women, but even that, for how to what extent is he the main benefactor? Because often there's a lot of conflict. We know that, it might be really nice and cozy in the beginning, the first year or so, but going forward, there's so much conflict that, even the men themselves, they many a times end up regretting why they got into it in the first place. So so that's the background to polygamy.
Yeah, thank you, Fatou. I mean, you talked about many points there, but one thing that I would say when you say who is the benefactor is a really important point. One of my good friends, she is a second wife, and I asked her, why did you do that? You're born in England, you're educated, but she says, I have two divorces behind me. This is my only chance.
Yeah.
So, okay, it might look that this is the right option, but actually, there's more to it than meets the eye. So lots of good points that you've made there. Thank you. So do you think polygamy is a form of abuse in the current times that we are living in?
Absolutely, it is. When you look at the power dynamics in a polygamous relationship, the husband is the one holding the power. There is so much power imbalance. So the husband dictates and controls everything. So mainly the husbands are the breadwinners and the wives are treated as subordinates to the husband, and that's a problem. And even between the co-wives as well, you would see that there is no equality between the two. Sometimes the husband would not treat them equally, and they might not even see themselves as equals as well, because there is so much rivalry between them. So that's another problem. And we know that in polygamous relationship, there is a lot of coercion and emotional abuse going on, because the first wife sometimes is coerced to accept, this institution, this new way of marriage, whether you like it or not. For example, your friend who's divorced twice may think that this is security for me. If I don't get married as a second wife, who's going to look after my children? Or I might not even find a husband at the end of the day who is not married. I might not have a young person, for example. So we are conditioned to believe, that this is the choice, this is what is available, and you have to take it. And there's a lot of emotional abuse that women go through. I was telling you that my dad had a second wife, when I was not long ago, a couple of years ago, and I saw how my mom um broke down. I saw how, because my mom is quite a strong woman, she's not educated, but she is way stronger than me. The things that she achieved for herself is amazing. She encouraged us to be educated. She was there, she stood by my dad. She was an entrepreneur. But when my dad had this second wife when I was young, she just accepted it because it's the norm. Those of you who are from Gambia would agree it's a norm. It's usually not a problem, especially the older generation. But then afterwards that marriage failed, and then now he got another one. But that really hit my mom so hard, because there's a lot of secrecy in polygamous marriages. When you least expect it, that's when it happens. When you feel, especially when you're in your 50s, you're older, you've spent 30 years with this man, and you think, okay, this is the time for us to um chill, relax, enjoy our marriage. The children are older. Let's just go for holidays and things like that. And bam, there's this young woman, added to the family, and it comes with all sorts of problems. So I saw my mom break down. She had high blood pressure. Her diabetes got worse. There's a lot of stress and anxiety. And then for us, the children, we didn't accept it as well. Me having my feminist hat on, I fought with my dad. I don't talk to him now. It's because of that relationship. So it can break relationships. It's very traumatizing to women. um, it creates a lot of conflict between siblings. And often when we talk about polygamy, we often miss the children, because back home, as a daughter, I don't have a say in what my dad wants to do. This is his life. This is what he wants to do. He's my father. I just have to agree. But it's a family thing. It's going to affect me. When you add somebody to our family, it's going to affect me, especially if the person is going to live in a family compound, which is what often happens. And I'm not going to be seeing my dad as I used to. So you have children who are neglected in the process because they don't have that much attention that they used to have. The father is busy chasing after the second wife, and the mother is busy fighting with the dad or the second wife. And in the midst of all of this, we forget the well-being of the child. For example, the children start getting anxiety as well, and stress, and they go to school and don't do well. And sometimes they can't even concentrate, and it's very confusing for a young child. Because I remember when I was young, I kept asking my dad, why is this other woman here? Is she like my mom's sister or something? And that's how they presented it, like it's your mom's sister. But then later on, she had baby, and the baby was my half brother. And it's all confusing, um trying to kind of I don't know how to say it, understand it. In fact, when you are that age, when you're small, when you're older, it's different, and the way you react to it is different. um I think also there is a lot of isolation in polygamous marriages, especially on the wife side, so the first wife and the second wife. So when you are a first wife and another woman is added to the family, I mean, you are excluded most of the times. You are you are kind of yeah, isolated, like especially when it happens in the diaspora here, for example, in the UK. Normally it's a secret because it's not allowed here, so you don't have anybody to chat to it about, because you probably, your husband may even tell you, don't tell anybody, because this is not accepted, and then you then don't have anybody to chat to it about. Or sometimes you may even want to talk about it, but because everybody else in the society is accepted it, if you want to be one person who says no, like in my mom's case, I don't want to condone this anymore, then you become stigmatized. You are on your own now. People start calling you names. Who are you to say that you don't want a second wife? You are in your 50s. What else do you expect? It's a really, it's very degrading, to women. There's no expression I can use to emphasize how degrading it is. And in Gambia, those of you who are from Gambia or Africa, you will know about this spiritual war as well that comes with it. All the jujus that the wives or the extended family would try to do to each other, so that they can be superior, or so that what they want happens. That's also another scary part of it, especially in the African countries. And also sometimes women, like I said, are made to believe that they don't have choices. So if you are a young woman in the Gambia in your late 30s and you're not married for the first time, you are forced, you're pressured by society to, that there is no choice, you need to get married, be a second wife, and really there is a choice, the same way the man has the choice to decide that they want a second wife. That's the same way a woman have the choice to say, I don't want to, or I want to. So there is a choice, but the way it is presented in our communities, it feels like this is it. You either take this or be on your own forever. And marriage is very important in these communities. When you're married, it's a totally different ball game. You are in a different status in society. You're more respected, even as a woman as well. Yeah. And sometimes they say, well, polygamy reduces extramarital affairs, and we know that's not true. So some women would feel, okay, let me stay in here. I am now going to stay in this relationship so that I can be secure that my husband won't go out. But we saw men who have 2, 3 wives outside with the other woman. It's not a guarantee. All of these things are choices that men make, and they must take responsibility of it. And I haven't even talked about, it's very broad, I haven't talked about the health impact, the STDs that can come with it. Because if you are a Muslim wife, for example, you may not have that choice to say, I want you to use a condom. For example, if you have a second wife, because that would mean that you are taking contraceptive, and again, another big issue in the community that I come from. So it comes, if you're unlucky, then there is no other way. If you're going to have sex with your husband and he's not protecting himself, and he has another partner, there is a high risk of the woman contracting STDs or other sexual viruses. So this is quite broad. I'm aware of the time, but
no, there are so many points there. The last point you talk about condoms.
That I'll just sum it up and say it's quite degrading. Yeah,
very degrading. But the thing you talk about condoms and contraceptive, that's not just in your community, that's in my community. No one ever talks about condoms. No one ever talks about contraceptive. So that's just a basic issue. Forget about polygamy, but actually contraception is something that's certainly not talked about in the South Asian community. And we've just been doing some films about condoms, and we've struggled with that issue. You touched on so many points about abuse, but also obviously mental abuse is a huge thing. So that the impact that will have on the first wife, but also the impact it has on the second wife.
Yeah. A
So
lot, yeah. That's why it's both of them
yeah,
actually, because then the second wife is regarded as, we call them a name in Gambia. They come and try to destabilize the family, but that's not. They make this choice to come, and sometimes they come in peace, but the first wife is not in acceptance of it. They
of
don't
course.
want to, so then that creates a conflict. So they can be isolated as well. The
Mm.
second wives, they can feel really isolated and on their own, and sometimes that's why it doesn't last long.
Mm.
Because if there is a lot of conflict, somehow, some way, someone drops out of the relationship at some point.
You talk about choice, and unfortunately, some women don't have the choice. So the only answer is to marry someone who's already got a wife, whether that's in Gambia and actually whether that's in the UK. So I'm aware of women
Mm-hmm.
marrying men who have second wives, as I mentioned, my friend,
Mm-hmm.
but other women in Oxford who've married that man, and I think there is choice, but actually for some of them there isn't choice because the stigma of being unmarried or divorced is worse than going into a marriage where there's already a wife.
So I would say there is still a choice, even if you make that choice to
Yeah,
say there is always a choice, but it's what you choose. So either you choose to be stigmatized and accept that, or you choose to be on your own. And that's a really difficult thing, isn't it? I always say we always have a choice, no matter how difficult it might be, or the impact on us, we always have a choice, and we just need to seek that help, because there is help available there. And if a woman chooses to be a second wife, I mean, as a feminist, I'm not going to say you shouldn't be. That's their choice. Some people
yeah,
just want to be a second wife. That's their choice. But if you are there and you are struggling, or you want to know more, then there are choices. I can share with you the options that you can take, but obviously that's a choice that we all have to make.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm just pointing out it's a very difficult
Yeah.
choice to make. That's
Yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
alluding to.
That's right. That's right.
It's
100%.
not easy.
No, no.
Thank
And
you.
for
Sorry.
women example, who, a woman who is totally dependent, you have all the women who are not financially independent. There's nowhere else, no accommodation. You have 5 6 children with this man. They will tell you, where do you want me to
Yeah.
go? I can't go back to my parents' home. I can't. There is not even a space for me and my children there. So those women are conditioned to stay there
Mm.
unless they have something else. For example, if you give them accommodation or provide financial support or things like that, then they might see that actually there is a possibility. And that's what happened in my mom's case, because it was about her leaving my dad's compound. So she invested so much in that house that she didn't want to lose that house. But my dad knows that he has a little bit of power in Gambia. For example, if my mom asks for a divorce, she would be sent out of that house, or we go to court. So we were ready to go to court, but my mom, wasn't ready to fight, and we ended up buying a house for my mom, and she's moving out of the house, and she is actually going to initiate the divorce instead. So she's taking that power again. So my dad is going to be actually very hit hard. He's going to get it really tough, because all he was banging on is, if you want a divorce, you're going to have to leave my
Mm.
house.
Yeah.
Can you imagine 30 years of marriage and you build that house? My dad doesn't live in the Gambia, so he's here in the diaspora. So my mom is basically has been looking after, paying all the taxes and everything in that house for the past 10 years, but even before that. you know
Mm.
but she's now independent. She doesn't have to worry about the house, which is what was keeping her there, to go through all that emotional abuse that she has to condone from my father. So if women are given the opportunity, if they are shown the way, they would make the right choice. But sometimes I know, if it's the family where we couldn't provide a house for my mom, probably she would have stayed in my dad's marriage for the rest of her life.
Thank you for sharing the personal details, Fatou. We really appreciate that. It's not easy to talk about your parents
Yeah.
and your childhood experience. It's not easy. So I really appreciate that. I should have said that earlier. Forgive me, but I just wanted to say that now. So we talked about Gambia quite a lot, obviously, because that's where you're originally from. But how does polygamy happen in the UK? because there are laws, but it's still happening. So how is it happening?
It is happening quite a lot, actually. So men would actually get married, for example, go back home and get married there. The first wife might be living here, and then they might go to their home countries and get married, either leave the wife there or the second wife there, or invite them as a family member, not as a wife, as a spouse, basically, because that's illegal. So bigamy is illegal in this country, and they know that. Most of the men know that. So sometimes they do the nikah. So nikah, for those of you who are familiar with the Muslim word, so it's a ceremony. It's like an unregistered marriage ceremony, basically. So you can still get married here and not register it and do it in a ceremony that is informal, so it wouldn't go down in the books. So a lot of especially the Asian communities are doing that. Muslim Asians are doing that in this country, and they're getting away from it, because it's not registered. So you kind of technically not breaking the law, because you're not registering the marriage. And they said also, if you get married in a country outside the UK and the laws there accepts the marriage, they accept polygamy, you are not going to be charged in this country.
Yeah, you're
But
not
if you
prosecuted
register,
here.
you're not going to be prosecuted. But I think if you get married here, two wives all here, and the first marriage is not annulled, is still intact, you can be in prison up to 7 years in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that's what many men are aware of, and now they have a back way to it.
Yeah, totally. But there's always ways around getting the law. If you want to do it, unfortunately. Someone's got their hand raised. Could you just hold on a second, because we're going to just ask one more question and then stop the recording. So just bear with us. So this is going to be my last question, but does technology make it easier to arrange polygamous marriages given the availability of apps for finding second wives? So the reason I asked this question, so my research was looking at apps to get a second wife, and there's a lot out there.
There is. So
I
was shocked. I was shocked as well. I came across it with this research. Actually, I was looking it up as well, and I saw this app, secondwife.com, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So this is a British Muslim here
app
in the UK, encouraging men to get second wife. And his argument is that, this is legit. It's better than having extramarital affairs. But it's there. It's definitely making it easy. It's easy access to communication. Before, in the olden days, maybe you have to walk to the, maybe even your parents arrange it for you, or you go and speak to the girl that you want to marry personally. But these days, there's social media. Facebook is there, Instagram, TikTok. It's all very, very accessible, especially if you're here. Internet is the easiest thing that many people can get. And I saw that now, in fact, it's not just the second wife app, which is for Muslim men. There's also the polygamy app, called the polygamy.com, for non-Muslims, if they want to get into polygamous marriages, then they can access it. So definitely it's there. And that is why the secrecy of it elevates, because it's all about, it's in your phone. You can be sitting and having dinner and you were there chatting to this woman until everything is done. When you get married, that's when your wife gets to know. So definitely the technology helps. It helps this arrangement. It's always been there, even with the extramarital affairs, but with the second wife, it's no exception. It helps.
Thank you. I was very shocked in my research of how many apps there are. And actually, I think you touched on it earlier, that actually younger people are doing this as well. So I was quite shocked at that. People a lot younger than me were actually becoming second wives, people in their early 30s even, and men having 2 wives, 3 wives even, which is quite shocking in the UK.
Yeah, it's a trend in my Gambian community now, for people who are here, not even back home. They go back home, get a second wife, and that's becoming the norm. And the men, they copy each other, like I said, because if you're being teased and stigmatized having a second wife, you want to show that you can do it. You're a man and you follow suit. That's happening.
Yeah,
And so that's why all the women, like women, women like us are sitting on eggshells, you know, you don't know when it's going to happen.
well, that's true. And I think something you made earlier before we go to questions is that you talked about Islam briefly, that, you know, as everyone seems to know, that men can have 4 wives. But actually, in the Quran, it also says that the Prophet Muhammad, who did, couldn't actually cope with 4 wives. They couldn't be treated equally. And also, he was a prophet as well. So the narrative should definitely change around that. And that's something that not many men like to talk about. I don't know how many men are on this web cafe, but that's something that needs to be, that's part of the education really for our to break that cycle, because you talked about how families, you know, the grandfather did it, the son does it, the grandson does it, but that's where things need to change, where we need to educate our sons in particular, and our women and our daughters, that this is not the way to lead your life.
Absolutely. And that they have a choice.
They
I
have a
mean,
choice.
yes, like for people like me, I was impacted directly.
Mm,
So I wouldn't even, I know my choice. I know I wouldn't accept polygamy, and I made it clear. I think women also sometimes they're sitting on the fence, like
yeah.
you need to be clear whether you want it or not. And if you don't want it, what are you going to do about it if it
Mm,
happens? You have to kind of have an action plan and look forward. Like if I said I'm sitting on eggshells now, not per se me, because I already have in my head what would happen if my husband should suddenly marry a second wife. But there are women who don't know. They wait until it happens. So try to be financially independent, develop
mm,
yourself, think about yourself. You know, it's very unlikely for men. If you're financially independent, you're educated, you know your rights, they don't mess about with you a lot. You know, they kind of know that, you know, I have to be careful with this woman. If I do this, this is what would happen. But if you are not that confident, and I appreciate not everybody is in my position right now to be, you know, maybe it's my background that makes me have this type of mindset, but there is not everybody, not all women are like me right now. But that's the goal, like to know that first there is a choice, this is an option. If I don't want it, how do I maneuver around it? How do I get myself out of it? I think that is important, especially now that we know that our brothers are actually competing each other on how many wives they get. And
mm,
very young, 1 year, 2 years in a marriage, your husband is looking for another person. So think about your finances. How do you spend your money? What do you invest in? What is more important to you? And I think there can be anything more important than yourself. If you put yourself first, you know, marriage is important, but you are the most important person, I think. So before you can look after a husband or please a husband, you must be happy with yourself first. You
yeah.
know, that's the mantra, and that's what I keep saying to women, you know. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thanks.
Fatu. I think we're going to end the questions there.
Ba-da-bum-bum-bum. Ba-da-bum-bum. Ba-da-bum-bum-bum.